The traditional network perimeter is obsolete. In the cloud, the definitive boundary is identity and access management. The most immediate failure happens at the storage layer. A single misconfigured Amazon S3 bucket, set to allow public access, invalidates a secure perimeter. This happens without breaking any cryptography. Perfectly secured data is simply handed over to the public internet because the identity rules permitted it. We see this impact when a logistics company left an S3 bucket entirely open, exposing sensitive shipment data belonging to several Fortune 500 clients. The scale of these misconfigurations can be massive. Another identical failure leaked 1.5 million files containing airline employee personal identifiable information and national ID numbers. If the access configuration fails, all underlying network cryptography becomes irrelevant. Identity is the single most critical failure point in cloud infrastructure. To fortify this vulnerability, architects implement role-based access control as the primary defense against excessive privileges. This system strictly limits user access, assigning permissions based solely on job roles, and restricting actions to exactly what the user requires for their tasks. We pair this with multi-factor authentication, which acts as the mandatory baseline to stop initial network entry via stolen or brute-forced credentials. Because configurations drift over time, continuous automated auditing is required to scan the environment, detect open endpoints, and immediately close unauthorized public access. Deploying these controls together transforms identity from an open vulnerability into a verifiable, hardened cryptographic boundary. Modern cloud applications rarely require repeated password entries. Continuous access relies on API keys and active session tokens. If an attacker extracts an API key, they gain total programmatic access to the underlying cloud services, allowing them to manipulate resources directly. For user-facing applications, attackers target the session directly. Using cross-site scripting, they hijack the connection, extracting the active cookie from the victim's browser. With the stolen token in hand, the attacker assumes the victim's exact privileges within the cloud application. Because this token represents an already authenticated session, this attack entirely bypasses passwords and multi-factor authentication checks. The first line of defense is enforcing strict token expiry policies, forcing users to periodically re-authenticate to keep the session alive. We also require rapid revocation mechanisms. If an active session behaves securely anomalous, the system must instantly invalidate the compromised token. Authenticated sessions offer no real protection if the underlying token is not continuously rotated and validated. Enterprise cloud storage introduces a different risk through continuous synchronization. Applications quietly connect local folders to cloud repositories in the background. This schematic illustrates a man-in-the-cloud attack, ignoring the login screen. The attacker targets the endpoint, replacing the legitimate synchronization token with their own. This swap silently reroutes the ongoing data stream out to an unauthorized node, bypassing security alarms entirely. Traditional endpoint security often misses this manipulation completely, leaving the attacker with persistent, undetected access to the files. To counter this, security architects deploy a Cloud Access Security Broker, or CASB, to act as an intelligent proxy layer. A CASB sits between the endpoint and cloud. It intercepts traffic, automatically replacing application OAuth tokens with heavily encrypted versions before delivering them. If an attacker attempts to present a swapped token to the CAS, it fails decryption at the proxy. Access is instantly denied. Because the endpoint itself cannot identify the manipulation, only an architectural inline proxy can effectively neutralize synchronization token theft. Attackers also deploy brute force to break infrastructure availability. They launch denial-of-service attacks to overwhelm the bandwidth, processing power, and memory of the target machine. These strikes range from basic volume-based floods using standard UDP packets to complex protocol-based attacks that exploit vulnerabilities in TCP handshakes to stall the server. A distributed denial-of-service event causes massive collateral damage, like the 2015 AWS outage that disrupted Netflix. Attackers maximize disruption by targeting content delivery networks directly, like the massive 2018 strike against Cloudflare's infrastructure. To survive this volume of traffic, administrators deploy load balancers and utilize those same content delivery networks to absorb and distribute the malicious requests across dozens of nodes. They combine this with access control lists and real-time traffic analysis to identify anomalous request patterns and drop the hostile packets before they consume resources. Cloud bandwidth cannot be defended at a single choke point. Infrastructure survival demands geographically distributed traffic mitigation. Storing highly sensitive data on hardware entirely owned and operated by a third party introduces a severe structural conflict. This creates immediate privacy risks. Cloud providers have the technical capability to monitor user data for marketing, profiling, or surveillance without explicit consent. It also triggers issues of data sovereignty. Because cloud servers reside in different physical countries, enterprise data becomes subject to local foreign government jurisdiction and access laws. The primary defense is strict data-in-transit encryption, ensuring the network path itself remains completely blind to the payload during transmission. Furthermore, data-at-rest encryption guarantees that even if a foreign authority seizes the physical servers or the hardware is compromised, the information remains unreadable to the host. Cryptographic control must remain with the client. The provider should manage the infrastructure while remaining permanently mathematically blind to the data sitting on its drives. The final structural threat is vendor lock-in. This occurs when an enterprise becomes overwhelmingly technically dependent on a single cloud provider's proprietary systems. This chart illustrates the severe friction of dependency. When migrating workloads to a competing cloud grid, a complex web of proprietary APIs ties the data down. Many zero-trust frameworks ignore this entirely. During migration, proprietary systems refuse to disconnect, actively halting the transition. The solution requires mandating strict data portability requirements and utilizing standardized provider-agnostic APIs from the very first deployment. True resilience in the cloud depends on architectural modularity and portability alongside cryptographic hardening. A zero-trust environment remains secure only if it can function entirely independently